vārda brīvība un žurnālista atbildība. Mediju anatomija.
Latvijas Sabiedriskie mediji pirmo gadu ir viens, vesels. Latvijas Televīzija, Latvijas Radio un sabiedrisko mediju portāls LSM oficiāli ir viena, vienība. Tomēr praktiskā saplūšana ir tikai sākusies. Vienlaikus ir jātiek galā ar izaicinājumiem, ko nes digitālais laikmets, kad mainās gan paši mediji, gan to patērēšanas paradumi. Mēs neesam vienīgie sabiedriskie mediji, kas gājuši tam cauri. Šonedēļ mēs, raidījuma producenti Ieva Zeiza un es, Māra Jansone, uzklausīsim britu pieredzi. Britu sabiedriskā raidsabiedrība BBC, līdzīgi kā mūsu sabiedriskais medijs, pieejama dažādās platformās. Tās ir raidsacijas, televīzijas kanāli un interneta versija. Protams, vēriens ir daudz apjomīgāks, ņemot vērā auditorijas plašumu un finansējumu. Tomēr problēmas, ar ko saskars mediji, jau ir līdzīgas. Kā no juridiski apvienota sabiedriskā medija kļūt par patiesi vienotu sabiedrisko mediju? Par to sarunājamies ar BBC pārmaiņu konsultantu Semu Vaiplu un ziņu moderatori Kasiu Madeiru. Let's start these big challenges, what faces all conventional media in digital era. It's social media, it's this big variety of content that we can find in internet, and that's not journalism always, it's different podcasts, influencers and stuff. So how BBC as a huge media is dealing with this?
So the BBC's organisational challenge was that, historically our power has been in radio and television, probably similar to Latvian public media. That's our legacy. So when digital came along, BBC website started in 1997. Which was very early in Britain, but the teams were quite small, and the team was a long way away. So when it first started, I remember what the early editor as he said it, I used to send spies down to the radio and TV newsroom to find out what was going on, because it was possible for him to sit down and watch the TV news at 10 o'clock and see a completely new BBC story that he had no idea about and that they were trying to then catch up with. So digital started as a really poor cousin of the big broadcast teams, and it's taken a while for them to be boosted, to have the resources to be able to, as you say it, produce the content. And just as the online team were getting used to it, then of course social media happens, and there are more and more different platforms. And so that is a real challenge of trying to deal with content on not just a website but social media. Do we do TikTok? Are we going to stay on X? Do we do Instagram? Do we do Facebook? That profusion of different sources. And to be honest, it has been a struggle trying to find the resource. But what the BBC has done is, to some extent, saved money in some of the broadcast areas and shifted money over to better fund the digital teams. But equally, there's only a limit to what you can do in terms of diverting. Most of it, and we can discuss this, Kasia will tell you more, is working in a smarter way, of getting better at planning, better at reusing content, avoiding duplication, planning things ahead so that we can get our best talent, whether they're TV, radio or digital, get them active on social media as well as online.
BBC took very serious from beginning this challenge, because I know in Latvian radio, we were using Twitter and stuff, but I didn't have a feeling that we are putting all effort to be there, and only after a while we understood how serious it is.
So we've been playing a bit of catch up with some of the social media. Twitter, formerly known as Twitter, now X, obviously we were there early doors. It's less useful now because of the Elon Musk effect, but politicians still use it, so we still use it. Instagram is fantastic. We've got loads of different bits of the BBC that are on Instagram, some more successful than others. BBC Mundo is a fantastic Spanish language format platform service that the BBC has, and they really embraced Instagram brilliantly. TikTok was one of those questions that the BBC was quite late to the game. Obviously, TikTok was really popular during COVID, and we didn't open up a BBC TikTok account for the obvious reasons that it has connections with Chinese owners. So we had a big question mark over it. When we then saw that TikTok was being really useful in terms of spreading information during Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, we then realised, you know what, if the audience is there, we've got to be there as well. And so we're now on TikTok as well. We've got nearly 10 million followers, 500 million likes, and if that's where the audience is, then that's where we've got to be. But we've now got dedicated teams for these platforms that generate the material, because obviously it's slightly different. What you have on TikTok is slightly different to what you have on Instagram, is slightly different to what you have on X. But the journalism is always the same. And in order to avoid duplication, we ensure that we can reuse our content, the stuff that we already have on outlets like the News Channel or the World Service. If it's a great interview, then we can use it across different platforms. We'll just dress it differently so it sits in whichever platform we then share it with.
People now are living in very different bubbles, and they are getting information from very different sources, and not always it's some serious television or radio. Or has it affected trust to BBC as a conventional media, or maybe you have faced with problems that people just don't believe journalists as they believed them 30 years ago, maybe?
Yes, I think that's the challenge that most media companies are facing. Is there is a distrust of media companies. And it is a challenge when you get into the social media sphere, because that's where a lot of conspiracies are shared, where a lot of mistruths, disinformation, misinformation is spread. I guess we all have a choice of whether we engage in social media or not. We could withdraw and just sort of say, look, we're not going to play that game. We could have, as Kasia says, we could have chosen not to go for TikTok. But we, as public service broadcasters, we need to reach as much of the audience. We don't feel we can just write off a younger audience that is mostly on social media. So we try to engage, and we try to counter some of the difficulties, the conspiracies, the untruths, by creating our own content. Some of that is fact-checking. But increasingly, the BBC is looking more at disinformation journalism. So we're doing stories about disinformation. How does it happen? How does it come about? They've just done a documentary on the Moldovan elections, going undercover, uncovering how Russian money was ending up paying for people to create TikTok content to promote pro-Russian parties. So as a way of uncovering the phenomenon and having people understand and start to make choices for themselves, decisions for themselves, understanding that actually you can't just trust everything that's on TikTok, and being transparent about what we're doing. And that, I think, it's very, very difficult, but that's one of the ways, and possibly a good way, of trying to maintain. Trust is the golden arrow of public service broadcasting. We need to be the trusted broadcasters that people come to when they're not sure if it's true or not. The BBC's view is we should be out there where the audience is and being that trusted voice, even if it's on a platform that we can't control and may, the algorithms may not be helping us.
Is there a way back from this mistrust? These processes, what's going on in the world, Donald Trump with his fake news policy, it affects people. can media gain that trust back?
The world is incredibly polarized. There are some politicians who aren't helping the situation. When you have such a divided society, one thing that we can do is ensure that everybody, and I mean everybody, is able to get truthful information. Whether they choose to use it or believe it or not, all we can do is ensure that they have access to it so they can then make up their own minds. It's a massive challenge. It's a huge challenge. I'm not going to pretend it's easy. But we have to strive, otherwise we give up, and then what happens? So as long as we can show how we make our journalism, why we follow certain stories, why we bring them to the audience, how we do it, how we explain ourselves, be really, really transparent, we then hopefully can create a trust between the audience, that they see why we're doing it, they see how we're doing it, so that they can trust that it's truthful. Because without them having the basic information at their hands, then polarization will continue. And the best way of getting people together is by getting everybody talking, because ultimately we're all the same.
And there is hope. So the Reuters Institute at Oxford University that looks into journalism, in their latest digital news report, they did some research looking at what people did when they came across content that they thought might be false, when they wanted to check it. And the reassuring thing for us as public service broadcasters is that the top category of where do you go is trusted news sources. In the UK in particular, the BBC came out very, very high. So that's the most popular destination for people to go to check if something is false. So that reassures me that actually a lot of that false content is out in social media. So that, I think, is an essential role that we have to play as public service broadcasters, whether it's the UK, Latvia, Moldova, Romania, wherever it may be, of being that trusted source, so that when people have been out there and read all the conspiracies, who you're going to trust, that's our role.
But about these short forms of stories that we are supposed to tell now, what's happening with the quality of information when we are using all these short forms? But because people, they're lazy, they don't want to spend much time to read something, listen something. They want everything quickly and now.
Vertical video and short format video is right now dominating everything, and people are scrolling, they don't have time, a couple of minutes, and that's about it. So we need to rise to that, and you can be creative and you can get a story across. Some of the best journalism we have are in our tabloid newspapers, who can get a really complicated story across in just a few paragraphs. If you need fancy words, you're not going to get the story across properly. You're not going to reach all of the audience that you could. The simpler way that you can say it, the simpler words that you can use, a couple of graphics, a couple of good bits of video, that is the best way. Just simplify everything, don't assume any knowledge, and if that's where the audience is, and if that's the kind of format that they're engaging with, then we need to be delivering that. And you can explain a complicated story. Of course, you're not going to get into the minutiae detail. You'll be able to point the audience to somewhere else where they can get a more in-depth view with a bit more analysis, but to hook them in, to give them the basics. If it's a short format video, then that's what we've got to do.
But for example, if a serious journalist wants to be closer to his audition, is he supposed to talk with those audition in social media? I don't know, maybe dance in TikTok because to be attractive, or maybe it works on other way.
We're obviously, all of us are experimenting at the moment. We're all trying things that work and don't work. And a lot of people point to the Washington Post and their TikTok videos, and it's like they've nailed it, they've got it. It's not for everyone. I mean, their followers is massive. So maybe that speaks to the fact that they are getting it right, getting really complicated stories across in a really amusing way. But that's not for everybody. So you've just got to try what works for you. And unless we try, if we don't even try, then we've already failed. So we've just got to do our best to engage in whatever way that is comfortable for you. I'm not going to be dancing on TikTok anytime soon, but I am trying to reach out to an audience that perhaps I would not have had if I wasn't at least active on the platform.
I would like to talk about merging. We have this process right now because last year we was 3 separate media: radio, television, and our internet version. So now it's all together, but our news departments, news services are working separately now, but they will go together, will be one unified service. Is there any risks in this process to lose something? Because now we are working like radio in one way, television in other way, we are competing.
I think the way we have been looking at it is to look at it from the point of view of the audience as a whole. So your radio audience will be very loyal and significant. Your TV audience will be loyal and significant. They may overlap to some extent, and they may overlap to some extent with your digital audience, but they won't they're different people in each of those platforms. So the way I tend to look at it is, if you think of the best story that you have done for radio may not have made it to TV, may not have been done online. So that story has only been heard by the fraction of your audience which makes up the radio audience. In a multi-platform model, you say, that story, assuming it works for TV and digital, but most stories do, you then say, okay, fine, how can we give that story the most possible exposure to our audience? And how can we tell it for TV? How can we tell it for digital? So you're using your best journalism to best effect, and then you're promoting it backwards and forwards. So if you, for instance, in your discussion program have a great interview with somebody on a particular story, well, TV can say, well, listen in to the radio discussion. Online can push you that way. Social media is very good at saying, oh, if you're interested in this story, tune in to Radio Latvia and you can hear more. So when you talk about mergers of newsrooms, it's really important to kind of be precise about what actually you're merging. So most BBC newsrooms that have a quote-unquote multi-platform model have very separate, what we call output teams. So in local news, which I was involved in the project to transform that, if you walk into the newsroom, there's a bunch of people who are only doing radio news on a day. There's a bunch of people who are only doing TV or only doing digital. So that final bit of publishing and broadcasting is still very distinct. But the generation of the stories is done in a multi-platform way. So Kasia might be out reporting in the field. Her bit of content, she will provide something for radio, something for TV, something for digital, that they then take, customize, and put out to their audiences. So that's a multi-platform model, but it's not merging your newsroom. It depends what you mean by merge.
Isn't it difficult for journalists to work in all different fields? Or you are working just and these platforms are taking from you what they want?
When you're working as a journalist, you're telling a story, and if you're telling a story, you can tell it in various different ways. Of course, there's a different skill to telling a story on TV, to radio, to online, but essentially you're telling a story. So it's not that hard to adapt. You're then thinking about workflow, because certain stories, there are so much interest that lots of different outlets want you all the time. So at that point, you might think, I need help. I need someone else to be here with me. So someone can look after TV, someone can look after radio. But if it's a quite simple story, for example, a flood, you're standing in a field that's flooded, you can very easily do a TV live. you finish the TV live, you can do a radio hit, you finish the radio hit, you can file some copy for online. You don't even need to type, you can just speak it into your notes on iPhone. That will then turn it into an email. You send it back to the newsroom and they've got some copy that they can format the way that they want to. So it's not about everybody doing everything all the time. I guess the bulk of that falls on the correspondent. But if you've been deployed on a story, you're there to work, not do a 2-minute hit for one bulletin an hour. So yeah, a little bit more work, but you can prioritize your workflow and you can make plans in order to make it happen. It's achievable. It just means that your voice and your story will be heard to a greater audience, because it's not just telly, it's not just radio, it's online as well, and that's great.
So that means there will be more variety of stories, because you don't need two different people to go to one flooding, so these people can do different jobs.
Well, that's the fantastic goal. That would be the ultimate aim, that rather than have 3 people standing in a flooded field, one doing online, one doing radio, one doing TV, you've got one person doing that flooded field, and then you've got 2 other people free to do other stuff. Obviously, in practice, it might work out a little bit differently, but that's the ideal.
So, for audience, it benefits from merging news services. That is conclusion.
So, for the audience, I think if you think of just radio and how many journalists you have in radio, you will get a certain number of ideas from that. But if you then say, hang on a minute, if we take all of radio and TV and digital and we pool all of that knowledge and everybody, and there's a lot of leadership that needs to go into this. If everyone feels that they can contribute an idea and you've got a diversity of staff who are now able to say, I've got a good idea of a story that I can tell, then your audience is potentially benefiting from the very best of your journalism, then spreads out to all of your different platforms. You equally, if you've planned it, some of your personalities, you asked about social media and is everybody going to be doing dancing TikToks? No, but some of your, might be a radio journalist, might be actually very effective on social media, might have a real personality that works on that currently perhaps they don't necessarily think about it. They might actually be very good on TV. So you're starting to the audience is beginning to benefit, and you have got some pockets of great expertise in Latvia Radio, Latvia TV, people who really know their subject. So the audience then benefits, and that certainly is our experience. When we have our expert on climate change or our political editor, we want them to be spread as far and wide so the audience benefits from their expertise, their contacts, their knowledge of the subject. And that's the potential benefit. So not thinking of multi-platform as reducing the story choice. It's just making sure that the best of your journalism goes as far as it possibly can.
So not compete, but work together. So thank you very much for your story.
Good luck on your journey.
Mediju anatomija.
Ar britu pieredzi sabiedrisko mediju darbā, saplūstot ziņu redakcijām un sekojot auditorijai arvien jaunās platformās, ar mums dalījās BBC ziņu moderātore Kasia Madera un pārmaiņu konsultants Sems Vaipls. Ar to no jums atvadās arī raidījuma veidotāja, producente Ieva Zeize, skaņu operators Rēnis Pudze un es, Māra Jansone.
Vārda brīvība un žurnālista atbildība. Mediju anatomija.